We're looking at 3-7 for the Kansas City Royals, but it's a giddy Rany Jazayerli here. Why? Why is he so happy? Why does he feel a need to waste so much gum? We'll get to the bottom of that question as well. Is Kris Bubic for real? What about the rest of the rotation? Why so much Jackie Bradley Jr. for this ball club? Where did the bats go in general? What is the plan at the back of the bullpen? And the return of the minor league minute. It's all coming up right now on the Kaufman Corner podcast.
You're listening to Kaufman Corner, the most in-depth analysis of the Kansas City Royals, breaking down the Royals like no one else can. Kaufman Corner is hosted by Rany Jazayerli and Soren Petro. Rany is a co-founder of Baseball Prospectus, author of Rany on the Royals, and former columnist for Grantland, The Ringer, and The Athletic. Soren is the award-winning afternoon drive host of the program on Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. Kaufman Corner is proudly brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete. One contractor, all things parking lot. Gann Asphalt and Concrete is now hiring for all positions: project manager, dump truck drivers, operators, and crew members. Starting pay up to $30 per hour based on experience, with paid time off and insurance, just to name a few of the benefits. Check out GannAsphalt.com for more info. Now, here's your hosts, Rany Jazayerli and Soren Petro.
And welcome back to the Kaufman Corner podcast. Soren Petro, Rany Jazayerli with you, proudly brought to you by our friends, as you heard, Gann Asphalt and Concrete, making parking lot problems disappear since 1994. The Royals have assumed their customary position. I mean, I guess maybe not. They're not in last, but the Tigers are kind of always down there as well. But they are sitting at 3-7 on the year. Yet, Rany, your disposition is not awful. Do explain.
I will, Soren. The Royals are 3-7. You're right, and yet I'm not that upset. In fact, I actually feel probably better about the Royals today than I did 11 days ago when the season started, because the way I would describe it is the Royals are three. The reason why the Royals have a 3-7 record is because they have performed extremely poorly in all of the areas of the game in which luck has a significant impact. But in terms of the things they can control, and specifically the things they control on the pitching side, all the dreams and hopes that we had all winter long when they started bringing in Brian Sweeney and Matt Quatraro and Zach Bove and overhauling the pitching, so far those dreams are being realized. And, I was, even when the Royals were 1-6, if we had this show Thursday night, I would have talked about how the Royals are not nearly as bad as their 1-6 record. Then they went out and won 2 in a row against the Giants. They lost today, but quite frankly, today might be the coup de grace of the pitching transformation. Because today we saw Kris Bubic, who going into the season had not really justified being on a major league roster and looked like a bust from the 2018 draft. We saw Kris Bubic throw probably the best game of his career. And I'm not just talking about the results on the field of 6 innings, 2 hits, a career high 9 strikeouts. I'm talking about the velocity on his fastball. I'm talking about throwing a pitch he had never thrown before, because the pitching coach, who shall not be named, would not let him throw it last year. Like, if you look at all of the metrics, you drill down to the pitch-by-pitch data that we are seeing from the Royals pitching staff, not just Bubic. We're talking about Brad Keller, Carlos Hernandez. You name half the guys on the pitching staff are doing something differently. And when I say differently, usually it means better. And yes, the results suck. The offense has been disappointing. The defense has been very erratic in places. The managing decisions today were disappointing. And I'm hoping that's because Matt Quatraro was not at the game, and that Paul Hoover, the mistakes that Paul Hoover made will not be repeated once Quatraro's back in the dugout. But the most important thing you and I wanted to see this season was evidence that the Royals could actually get pitchers to pitch well, pitch better, and we're seeing it. And that, for now, that is enough.
The Royals were 1-6 on Thursday evening, the 5 o'clock hour on Thursdays. On my radio show, we have Jeff Passan on. Fantastic. The industry's leading MLB insider. He does a fantastic job, and he's a great radio guest as well because he's opinionated and thoughtful, and something that a lot of other writers just are not. He has independent thoughts as well, something that many writers do not have. I've often said, writers don't know anything until, like in baseball, parlance, till a general manager or a manager tells them what they think. Right.
Well, there are writers who are journalists who report what they're told. Then there are writers like me who, are muckrakers and just and basically spend their entire career writing about how nobody in baseball knows anything, which itself is not true, but like not afraid to express opinions, maybe too unafraid to express opinions.
Yeah. Okay. So let me be clear. Yes. There are many in I don't know. I don't like, because there's reporting. You can be a journalist and be informed and write a forward thinking piece that's factually based, but brings some opinion into where you think it's going to go. Reading the data and hypothesizing about where it's going to go. And there are many writers that just won't do that. They are just what they have been told. They will put a series of quotes together and say, here's what GMs think, or here's what, but not, okay, but here's how we all tie it all together. Jeff is one of the guys that can do it all, right? So that's why I like the conversation with Jeff. But I bring it up because that was what I said to him. I said, listen, they're not hitting. I get it. It's ugly. There are other things not to like. But the starting pitching is, if you're going to hand out T-shirts, like I've seen a lot of T-shirts, or slogans, if not T-shirts. This year, the slogan was on a T-shirt. Maybe it's not always on a T-shirt, but I've seen a lot of slogans in spring training. And this year's T-shirt was "Raid the Zone," right? And if you looked at it at that point, even with Jordan Lyles, who I think was like 14 of 26 batters faced, he threw first pitch strikes, but there was some 20 of 25. I think Greinke was, and I know Zach's for the most part a completed. He is what he is. If he's changing, he's eroding, right? And then finding a way to still get people out with skills that are not what they once were. But they were doing what they set out to do. And like I said, I've seen so many slogans at spring training, and so this is what we're going to do, and this is what, and then it just all immediately went to crap as soon as the season started, and they never came close to doing it. It was just a catchphrase. Right. It was, here's what we're hoping for. And we've put a nice little T-shirt to it. Right. That's how the organization operated. Then they went into the spring training and into the season doing exactly the same things that they had always done. And there was no tangible proof that the slogan had done anything other than give them a talking point when, media fatties like me stuck a microphone in their face. Early on, still very early, all around, one of these times maybe we'll discuss when is it not early. I had that conversation with Peter Vermees. It's not early anymore, by the way, with Sporting. But they're doing what they set out to do. And I listen, Dayton Moore arrived and said pitching is the currency in baseball, and never really, frankly, delivered that. I mean, not at any point did he really did they have a great bullpen for a stretch? They sure did. And enough pitching and got it done and built a world championship team. They did, and flags fly forever, and we'll forever be grateful to Dayton Moore and all the people that worked around him to make that happen. But they never validated pitching as the currency in baseball. They sure as hell didn't act like it as an organization.
And they didn't invest it well. I mean, if pitching is the currency, if you have money, put it into a solid, stable investment. The Royals had money, and they invested it in penny stocks and crypto, and they didn't give that currency a chance to appreciate, to increase in value, because they never found a way to make those pitchers better. And now suddenly they are. And it's such a stark contrast between, because we're talking about the same pitchers. Seven of the guys on the roster, I think it's 6 or 7 guys, were on the roster at the end of last season. You look at those guys, that's a pretty large sample size to look at their stuff. And the reason why I'm focusing on those metrics is those metrics stabilize incredibly quickly. One start is enough to say this guy's doing something differently than he did before, right? If a guy has increased velocity, you can tell in the span of 5 pitches if he's throwing his fastball 2 or 3 miles an hour faster than he did the year before. So these are really the only stats you want to look at the first or second week of April, right?
Yeah.
Everything else is noise.
Yes, and by all accounts, it's and you've looked at we've talked about the different breaks on what Kris Bubic has done. You tweeted out, I know, during the week about how Bubic looks different, and I know we want to talk about him, but I think the overall. But what I like is that new coaches have new approaches, have reached out to the pitchers, and they're getting results. And if nothing else, they've listened to it. Like what a novel idea. Kris Bubic wanted to throw a slider. And instead of telling him he can't because, you're going to have a battle of wills, a control freak session on, well, this is the vision that I have for a pitcher and what we think they should be and what worked a long time ago in Atlanta and trying to force that on him. Instead, it's like, okay, that's what you want to do. You're the guy that's got to get on the mound and you're the guy that's got to throw the ball. So let me help you make that pitch all it can be. And along the way, as I gain your trust, then hopefully I can help you out with other things. And that seems to be what's going on with Kris Bubic when you see, where he's been in the past to what he's looking like now, it's night and day. And that is a product. And even Jordan Lyles, I'll even point to the start from Jordan Lyles in the sense that he's pitching. Look, he's here to eat innings. That's the only reason he's here. And viewing him in any other way is foolish. But they are giving him an assignment and he's carrying it out. And we just didn't see that. I mean, how long do we, whether it's Giordano Ventura, 2 or 3 years of him hitting guys and doing that, there seems to be a real connection with the pitching from the coaching staff and from what it is they set out to do. And if you set out to do something and you do it, that needs to be acknowledged. Listen, today's loss really sucked. I'd already put, and I've talked about losing games late is a disaster. It's like losing twice because it was 4-6. They were already 4-6 in my book. And now they got to give that win back to 3. And now they add a loss. It's like 2 losses when you lose late. Today's loss really sucked. I've seen some of the comments up there, people talking about some of the decisions, taking Bubic out, all those kind of things. And those are relevant discussions to be had. But the big picture is they hired people from the Rays and Guardians to do things that the Rays and Guardians do. And that is happening. That is a positive sign for this organization.
Absolutely. I mean, and let's look at the Rays getting off to basically the greatest 9-game start in the history of baseball. And that's not an exaggeration. They've outscored their opponents by 57 runs. They've played maybe the 3 worst teams in baseball, the Nationals, the A's, the Tigers. So, keep that in mind. But still, the Rays clearly aren't missing Matt Quatraro and Paul Hoover at this point. But we clearly, I think, hired from the right organization. And the points you're making are absolutely valid. Jordan Lyles, I'm not about to say, I'm changing my mind on that signing just yet, the way I have with Aroldis Chapman.
Right.
I think too much money for too many years. I think he's too mediocre. But I will say this: his last start, Jordan Lyles has been in the major leagues. This is his 13th season in the majors. His last start, he struck out 9 batters and walked none. That's the first time in his 13-year career he has struck out 9 or more batters with no walks. Now, he gave up 5 runs in 5 2/3 because he gave up 2 runs because his stuff is just not good. He doesn't throw nasty enough to avoid hard contact, even when he's throwing strikes. But you know what? If you keep striking out 9 batters and walking 0 in 5 2/3 innings, you'll get better. You'll get better results on balls in play. Like that. That'll still play. Kris Bubic. Let me read something Lance Brzezowski was tweeting. This is a guy who's worked with Driveline. This is after his first start, not today. This is after his first start.
By the way, the first start, which is why you got to go beyond the numbers when you do this kind of thing, because his first start was 5 innings, 7 hits, 2 runs, 1 walk, 4 strikeouts. So
right,
wasn't
the results
overwhelming.
were fine. He was throwing strikes at least, and Bubic has had issues with that. He's walked 1 batter in 2 starts. By the way, that's the first time in his career he's ever walked 1 batter or less over 2 consecutive starts. But even in that first start, which results-wise was mediocre, this is what he was writing. Royals' Kris Bubic looks like an entirely new pitcher. His velo is up about 2 miles an hour across the board, now sitting 93, 94 on his 4-seam. His extension is also up 6 inches, and it's lowered his release height by 2 to 3 inches. His 4-seamer has lost 5 to 6 inches of arm side movement. This might be an orientation change on the ball. So he's throwing the ball with a different spin. So that's not a sign of less stuff. His stuff plus number, and stuff plus is a complicated formula. It takes in all the attributes of a pitch: its velocity, its movement, its location, everything into one number. But Stuff Plus has the value of normalizing very quickly. You can look at a guy's stuff in one start, and that has meaning. Whereas, a guy can go out and throw 7 shutout innings, and that could just be balls in play luck. His Stuff Plus goes from 81 to 112. 100 is average. So his fastball, which was well below average last year, was suddenly above average. New slider is a banger. Remember, this is the pitch he tried to throw. He wanted to throw last year, was not allowed to. He threw 9 of them in his first start. Hard baby sweeper at 85 miles an hour with 9-inch horizontal. Stuff Plus at 119. So a slider he's never thrown before in his life is grading out as above average the first time he's ever thrown it. Changeup is up 3 miles an hour, but lost 3 inches of vertical break, making its separation from his four-seamer larger. So basically now he's the difference in the movement, the late movement on his fastball, which doesn't drop nearly as much as his changeup. The gap by which they drop is more. So a batter who's sitting on one pitch is going to have to adjust more when he throws the other one. Again, these are all good things. And that was, again, after his first start. Today's start, his velocity was actually a little bit lower. He was more like 1 mile an hour above last year's average. Last year, he averaged 91.9. Today, he was around 92.8. He was at 93.5 his first start. So his fastball velocity is up a mile to a mile and a half, which is not nothing, especially if you're a lefty whose fastball was slightly below average. Now, I mean, if he's hitting 93 as a left-hander, that's an average velocity fastball from a guy whose fastball velocity was probably his worst attribute. But you throw on top of that the other pitches. I don't know if you watched the game today. I watched his entire start, which thank God for the new rules. I'll tell you, it's changed my viewing experience. I don't know how it's affected you, but the first 6 innings flew by in like an hour and 50 minutes, and it was a joy to watch. He threw 7 sliders today. So he threw 9 the first time, 7 today. I'm going to look and see pitch by pitch. I know the first 3 went swing and a miss, foul ball, swing and a miss. Like he's getting swings and misses. He had 18 swings and misses today. That is the highest number in his career. He also had 15 called strikes today. What really struck me today is I think batters, he has a reputation of having a motion that's hard to pick up. And you could see that today. They were taking a lot of pitches that were like in the strike zone, not like borderline pitches. They just had trouble seeing what he was throwing. So out of 76 pitches total, Kris Bubic had 33 what we call CSW, called strikes or strike swinging, which is a terrific metric to see a pitcher's dominance. 33 out of 76 pitches were either swinging strikes or called strikes. In other words, you take foul balls out, so they make no contact. Anything above 35% in a start is considered elite. He was at 43% today. I mean, this was just legitimately a dominant start from Kris Bubic, to the point where people in the comment section are complaining he was taken out after 76 pitches. I don't have an issue with that.
When do we think we were going to see people complaining that Kris Bubic is out too soon?
Exactly. If that's our problem now is Kris Bubic isn't throwing enough innings, that's a good problem to have.
Yeah. Who had that on the 23 Royals bingo card? Bubic not throwing long enough into the game. That was not something we heard about.
Right. And to me, Kris Bubic is right now the canary in the coal mine in a good way. I thought it would be Daniel Lynch. Daniel obviously was supposed to be the guy who was in the rotation, whose reputation exceeded his results for the last couple of years. Lynch is on the IL right now, but I mean, Bubic has, Lynch has better stuff than Bubic. Bubic takes that role, and if this is any indication of where the Royals are going, I mean, count me in, because what we saw today was just a masterpiece from Bubic. But it's not just him. Brad Keller, he's never thrown a curveball in his life. His curveball this year in 2 starts, he's thrown it 25% of the time. It's his second most used pitch. I mean, he's still getting Brad Keller results, still throwing too many balls out of the strike zone. I think he's walked like 7 guys in 11 innings. But his last start, he had in the first 4 innings, he had 3 walks and 0 Ks. That's like classic Brad Keller right there. Even when he's succeeding, he's dancing on edge. But he finished with 3 strikeouts, I think, in his last 4 batters, 2 of them on that curveball that he had never thrown before. So he suddenly got, you take a number 5 starter, but give him a brand new pitch that is grading out as above average. Maybe now he's a number 3 starter. You know what the difference between a number 5 and a number 3 starter is? If you can turn 2 or 3 number 5 starters into number 3 starters, you take a team that's got a 70 win projection, and now they're a 500 team. That's a huge difference, and we're seeing it happen overnight.
By the way, the Kaufman Corner podcast proudly brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear in Kansas City since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty. You can find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things parking lot. Make sure you tell them you heard about them here on the Kaufman Corner podcast for anything your business might need with its parking lot. How about this one? Adam says, haven't been this impressed with the young Royals lefty since the Jimmy Gobble start in Toronto. Tongue planted firmly in cheek on that one. Hashtag sarcasm. Ryan said last year we would have never complained about pulling Bubic. Yes, you would have complained when you saw his name on the roster for or on the lineup card that he was going to be starting that day. And I do get it. Listen, Adam's making a joke here, but it's early. We can't sit here and say it's early to poo-poo away the lack of offense and those things, but then declare that it's a finished product with Kris Bubic. We saw, and I always go back to, I know this is the hitting side, but 300 at bats or so and 18 home runs, with like 15 of them being pull home runs for Mark Teahen one year. And Mark just wasn't able to, capture that and create, keep it going beyond there. But the signs are very good. That's why we bring up the rest of the pitching. And it's why I go back to, this is the stated goal. And at the very beginning of spring training, in fact, the day full squad reported, I sat down with Brian Sweeney, the pitching coach, and he talked about Bubic and his slider, and yeah, I'm excited to work with him on it. He's excited about it. We want to make sure that we get it ready to go. And when I hear somebody, for lack of a better term, call their shot and talk about how they plan on working with it and incorporate it, and then to see it come to fruition, this isn't an accident, right? There are times, Patrick Lennon has a nice spring training and maybe hits a home run on opening day. Tuffy Rhodes hit 2 home runs on opening day for the Cubs. It did not, was it 3 on opening day? It did not foretell a career of greatness, right? It just happened. Sometimes things happen.
And that's why I'm less concerned about the result. If you just look at the box score line, 6 shutout innings, 9 strikeouts, career high, 9 strikeouts. That's great. But that's why you got to look at the internal metrics of what is he actually doing. And to go back to Jimmy Gobble, we don't have that on Jimmy Gobble. I mean, it was 20 years ago, right? So I don't know if we had pitch data on Jimmy Gobble, would we be nearly as excited? I would say no. And I'm gonna call out Adam, since he had the temerity to bring up Jimmy Gobble and try and ruin my mood. The Jimmy Gobble start in question in Toronto, I just looked this up, was May 3rd of 2004. It was a great start because he was 1 out away from a complete game shutout in a 2-0 game. Of course, this being the Royals in 2004, he wasn't able. Not only did he not get the shutout, but the Blue Jays ended up tying the game at the bottom of the ninth. But that's not the point. The point is, in that game, this great Jimmy Gobble start, he struck out 1 batter.
Yeah,
in 8 2/3 innings. Even if you just look at the raw data, 9 strikeouts, 18 swings and misses. I don't think Jimmy Gobble ever had 18 swings and misses in a start in his career. I'm gonna put that out there. I don't have the data, but I'm gonna guess so. But again, look at the stuff. Look at what they're doing. Look at the velocity. Look at the movement. Look at the new pitches that weren't there before. And you have to say to yourself, something's afoot. Something new is happening. And also look at the comments from the Royals and the stated intention of who they brought, who they hired, who they fired. This was the intent. It wasn't just a fluke. If we come into the season with the same coaching staff as last year and this was happening, we wouldn't be, I'm not saying we would be negative, but we'd be certainly more confused, more surprised, and maybe a little more skeptical, sure. But the Royals said this is what they want to do. They've been talking about it for months, and it's happening. Like, what more can you ask for than a stated intention with a desired result that corresponds to it?
And it gets the Royals closer to what the results should be on the 2018 draft class. I know that was one of the earlier comments we had in the chat. By the way, if you're catching us via the podcast, later on in the week, we stream live Sunday nights at 10, most weeks, excuse me. Sometimes we end up on a Monday because of scheduling difficulties. But usually, if you want to be a part of the conversation, 10 o'clock Central Time on Sundays. But, you draft 5 pitchers in the first 2 rounds. And we've said many times, top of the rotation, bottom of the rotation, reliever, and 2 guys that don't ever really produce. You've had a successful go of it. They're getting closer to that. And the other thing that's really important is, for this organization, unless, for there to not end up being a total, blow up to restart the thing, is if you're going to stay the course with JJ Piccolo, the problem needs to be what you replaced. It needs to be Dayton Moore, and it needs to have been Mike Matheny, and it needs to have been Cal Eldred. And there are early signs that those were the problems. Like, listen, we'll talk about the hitting, and it's still not where it needs to be. They're not getting enough runs. We can talk about the lineup construction. I know there's been a lot of comments about that as well. But pitching is the currency in baseball was not a stupid thing to say. They just never really backed it up. And when you think you got enough pitching, get more pitching. That's what John Sherman said soon after he bought this ball club. And develop more. Getting more pitching isn't just going out and signing it or drafting it. It's developing the pitching you have in house, taking guys that are not factors on your big league clubs and making them factors on your big league clubs. And that's what we're seeing here. That's why this is so important. That's why you're giddy. That's why I'm happy. That's why when I brought it up with Jeff Passan, and I said, listen, here's the silver lining. He's like, yeah, do you think it'll last? And I'm like, I don't know. We get new, for all the reasons we've just stated. I'm like, I don't know. But I've got a lot more reason to believe there are a lot more indicators that this could last. And I think he's just going on, hey, Royals, they just don't do it.
And I completely get it.
I get it. Yeah.
When you're trying to project the future, the simplest and safest thing to do is to assume that the future will look like the past, whether you're trying to pick stocks, figure out where you're going to live tomorrow. Like the future, it was Dan Quisenberry who said, I've seen the future and it looks very much like the present, only longer. Right. Yeah. So futures are looking. So I totally understand. The Royals have been a certain way with developing pitching for 20 years. Why would you think that would change? Except that we have some reasons to believe, yes, it will change. And yes, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me 37 times, shame on me. And I certainly am deserving of plenty of shame for believing the hype in the past. But the difference is that there are reasons, there are actual reasons, there are personnel changes, there are coaching changes to make me think this time might be different. And also the results I'm looking at are not just, they lucked their way into, allowing 10 runs over a 4-game stretch. No, we're looking at, we're getting down to the most atomic level of pitching, which is the value of each individual pitch. And that is different.
So let me ask you on Brad Keller. Are you buying that Brad Keller's a different guy?
I don't think he's making the kind of transformation Kris Bubic is, right, potentially, but anytime a pitcher has a completely new pitch that he's throwing 25% of the time, yeah, he's probably a different guy. I'm not yet sure that means he's better, but the potential is there that I wouldn't have said back in February when we were debating whether or not he was even worth tendering a contract to. Anytime a pitcher is throwing a completely new, we're not talking about, he's throwing, he's ditched this 4-seamer to throw a 2-seamer. A curveball is completely different motion than the 2 pitches he's relied on his entire career, his fastball and his slider. He's got a pitch that does something totally different in terms of its plane of motion, in terms of its velocity. So I'm saying that the jury is out. I think he could be, if he's 10% better, that makes him a manageable number 4 starter, as opposed to a guy who probably shouldn't have been in the rotation last year.
I'm optimistic, but that better way to put it is I'm pessimistic on Brad Keller. I'm hopeful, but I'm pessimistic. I still see 16 base runners in 10 innings with only 9 strikeouts. He's got a long way to go before I get on board.
I won't argue with that. The one other thing I'll say,
he still looks like a 9-batter guy to me.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the other thing is I do wonder how easy it's going to be for him to stick around a third time to the lineup. But when we talk about sticking around in the lineup a third time, the difference between having 2 pitches and having 3 pitches is immense, because there's a lot of evidence that shows that pitchers, the degree to which they fall off the third or especially fourth time through a lineup in a game is it correlates very well with how many different pitches do they throw, which makes sense, right? If you only throw 2 pitches, the chances are by the third time through the lineup, the batter has seen both of your pitches 3 or 4 times, and they're that much more likely to be able to pick up on which one you're throwing and anticipate the plane that the ball's coming in at. If you throw 3 pitches, they may have only seen them once or twice each, and so that adjustment is harder for them to make. I just want to say one thing about Brady Singer, which in terms of his stuff, I haven't seen much of a change. But what's interesting is, like Bubic, Brady Singer's extension is significantly larger than last year. By extension, I mean how far he is from the rubber when he lets go of the ball. So he's letting go of the ball about 6 inches, both him and Bubic, about 6 inches closer to the plate than last year. And his extension this year, I think, was in the 98th percentile for Brady Singer. It's only 2 starts, but like that's, again, one of those metrics that stabilizes extremely quickly, because when you have a standard motion, if you've changed your motion, you can pick up on that within a few pitches. He's letting go of the ball at a different spot than he used to. And 6 inches is almost, 1%, 0.8% of the way, from the rubber to home plate. So essentially, if you're letting go of the ball that much closer to the plate, it makes all your pitches look about a mile an hour faster. It has an impact, not an enormous one, but it has an impact, and that has to be a deliberate change. You don't make that much of a change by accident. So every pitcher seems to be doing something a little bit differently. We heard about Aroldis Chapman. Where the hell did this velocity come from that's been gone for 5 years? Well, the Royals got him to stand a little bit more upright. He was a little bit too coiled in his motion, which was making him pump the fastball, and not air it out. And that seemed to be taking away his velocity. They found a flaw in his motion. They fixed it. This week, he threw a pitch that tied for the hardest thrown fastball in the history of the Royals so far as we have pitch data, 103.5, tying Kelvin Herrera for the hardest thrown fastball in Royals history. So, I just named 4 different guys, and there are probably some others we can talk about, who are doing something substantially different that they had before. And in all 4 cases, it seems to be making those guys a better pitcher.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the bats, if you're ready to move over there.
Okay.
Jackie Bradley Jr., I'm not sure that he always takes it to the plate, but 118, 286, 118. Any ideas that at least early on, that the Royals' approach to hitting was going to bleed over into Jackie Bradley Jr. and rejuvenate his offense have not been the case, yet he's playing quite a bit. Are you okay with this? At least until Drew Waters gets back, or is this a fundamental problem, the proverbial burr under your saddle?
It's a burr. It's definitely a burr. I don't know if it's a saddle burr, or it's Aaron Burr. It's a burr. But I mean, as of right now, Jackie Bradley Jr. has more plate appearances than Edward Olivares. That is ridiculous. And I mean, we talked last week about how he was one of the pleasant bright spots of the first 3 games of the season was Edward Olivares in the very beginning of the season was hitting, because I'm like, well, they'll at least keep playing him. Maybe not so much. I mean, because Olivares has hit in his very limited time. He's 278, 350, 500. Like, what's the problem with that? Why wouldn't you play that guy? Jackie Bradley Jr., I understand the defensive difference. There is a substantial defensive difference. And the Royals need defense. Yes, they have some defensive issues. But this isn't a choice between, a 100 OPS plus guy and an 80 OPS plus guy. Jackie Bradley, going back to 2021, has an OPS plus of 45. That's like Nefi Perez in 2002 territory. That's like, I think, Zach Greinke's career OPS plus. I'm going to check and see if he's close to 45. Like, that's just terrible. Jackie Bradley Jr. cannot hit. I hate to say it. No, forgive me. Zach Greinke's career OPS plus is 60. So Jackie Bradley, all of us Royals fans would love to see Greinke get some at bats. If we could have him play bat in favor of Jackie Bradley Jr., it would probably make the team better. Today, the Royals were up 1-0 in the top of the 8th inning. Nicky Lopez leads off with a double. Jackie Bradley's up, the number 9 hitter. Olivares did not get an at bat in the game. And with the lead, they're not going to pinch it there with the lead. All Jackie Bradley had to do was move the runner over to third base. He didn't. He struck out. MJ Melendez then hit a deep fly ball to center field that would have easily scored an insurance run if Jackie Bradley just moved the runner over. The Royals give up 3 runs in the bottom of the inning and lose the game. Like, runs count. Yes, Jackie Bradley may save some on defense, but right now he's hurting the Royals more on offense. Use him, but use him as a defensive replacement late in the games. He should not be starting. He should certainly not have more plate appearances than Edward Olivares.
Here's my frustration here, and I'm going to go back to something we talked about, and then we raised awareness to this. If you're a regular listener to the Coffin Corner podcast, and I'm interested to see how it plays on the infield. The pedigree, the history of what Matt Cotrero and even Paul Hoover, filling in right now for Cotrero, who's out with COVID, is one of pitching and defense. I mean, it's literally what we had heard Dayton Moore talk about, but they rarely did by having guys like Hunter Dozier play all the time and giving him contracts. And we said going into this year, the thing that was interesting was you're going with a guy at shortstop who hasn't been great defensively. The best defensive shortstop you've got, which is supposedly the most important defensive position you have, Nicky Lopez, doesn't really have a spot till he's filling in. He's a utility guy, which means he's often not going to play at the position that he could have the biggest impact defensively. That's not the mindset that they have in Tampa. That's not how they go about doing things. And they go about doing things with oftentimes an eye towards defense being the first choice. And so I wonder, and I fear if this isn't the makeup, and that is okay, listen, yes, we want to get to that mindset at some point. We want guys, and a number of people have said, I think even Justin and I put it up there. So, at some point, stop with the Michael A. Taylors and the Jackie Bradley Juniors and develop a guy who can play defense and hit like Carlos Beltran and Lorenzo Cain. And yes, that's ultimately what everybody wants. And that's the direction they need to go. But they have to start, they have to look at MJ Melendez in A ball or certainly by double A and go, not a catcher. Right, going out to the outfield and build them. They have to look at Bobby Witt Jr. and the way Randy did and say, what's best for our team is him at third base. He can be a really good defensive third baseman, and we'll have the true glove guy at shortstop. And what I'm wondering about Jackie Bradley Jr. is this the overcompensation of, look, we're not playing the infield the way we really in our hearts want to play the infield, and for good reason. I'm not saying there's a war already between Cotrero and JJ Piccolo. They understand the need, if you're going to put a bunch of money into Bobby Witt Jr., we got to really figure out what the hell he is. That's priority number one. And so other things have to take a break. But I wonder if the Jackie Bradley Jr. thing isn't just overcompensation for, I don't have the infield I need. I sure as hell can't be letting balls drop in the outfield. And so they're playing Jackie Bradley Jr. more than even they really want to, because it's somewhat hurting their soul every day when they see the defensive lineup they're putting out there on the dirt.
I absolutely think you're right. I mean, and I it's a completely human impulse. I mean, it's a good impulse that they value defense, but I think my issue, where I differ with the Royals, is in this thought that, well, the defense that you're getting from Jackie Bradley Jr. compensates for the offensive drop-off. And I think they just don't appreciate just how substantial that drop-off is. Jackie Bradley can no longer hit. He's never really hit. He's had like one really good year in the majors. And, the Royals have been lusting after him for like a decade. And he checks off all the boxes. He looks great in uniform. He can run. He can fly. He hits line drives in batting practice. But like, the results have never been there. But they've really never been there the last 2.5 years. So that's my issue there.
They were there early in his career.
When he was like 24, 25, maybe. Like, he's 33 years old now. So, but I do want to actually say one thing, which I can't believe I'm saying, but I think another reason why I've been optimistic about the Royals. We've talked about how the pitching has looked good. You mentioned the MJ Melendez thing. If there was one thing I was confident about going into the season, it's that MJ Melendez should no longer be catching, right? That his defensive metrics, his framing was so terrible that there's just no way you can come back from that and become even a decent framing catcher. I don't know if you've seen some of the data on MJ Melendez catching, because this year he's only caught today was his third.
I haven't looked because I haven't figured there was enough to worry about looking.
There wasn't, but again, and some of this data, it's noisy. It's too early to make any kind of proclamations on. Today was just the third time he caught this season. But his second time out on Thursday, he caught the game. MJ Melendez had 7.4 called strikes above average, which meant he was worth 1.7 runs above average with his framing. 7.5 called strikes above. He got 7.5 calls above what you would expect, those borderline pitches. Let's put it this way: there were 53 called strikes in that game with MJ behind the plate. 6 of them were actually balls that were out of the strike zone. Now, in one game, there's a lot of noise because you have hitters umpires and you have pitchers umpires. Today, I suspect, I haven't seen the data today, but today I suspect his framing was probably good, but the framing was good for both sides because the umpire had a very large strike zone. So this is all preliminary. But even for one game to be that much above average, and you watch MJ catch. I mean, that was one of the reasons I watched every single pitch today on the pitching side. I wanted to see how he was setting up, what he was doing, and you can see the effort. Absolutely, you can see an effort with every ball that's borderline. He is trying to he's probably, and sometimes he's trying too hard, I think, to try and get that call. But I did not sense that effort last. I didn't sense that intentionality last year because I don't think it was a priority. I just don't think he was told that this is what you have to do to get results, that this is an important part of the game. And so now I'm like starting to question almost everything in the sense of like the limitations of coaching, how much of an impact coaching can have. If they can turn MJ Melendez into even a mediocre defensive catcher, then I have underestimated the impact to which coaching can, improve this team. And if they can turn MJ Melendez into an even mediocre catcher, that changes everything about him because as an offensive force behind the plate, he's massive. But it also says if they can do that, what can't they do? Like it's not just that that's a huge impact on the game that MJ Melendez can catch. It's more like what does that say about the new Royals coaching staff that they can take a guy who looked like a lost cause and turn him into something valuable? What else can they do that we haven't seen yet? So that's another reason for my optimism.
I'm with you. And the early signs are good. And again, if it was just the same crew around him, I'd say noise.
Right.
Anomaly, but we know that Paul Hoover's been the guy that was working on it. They came in, they moved him up in the box to help his pitch framing, and they had things that they looked at and right away said this has to change, and they're getting results. So we know that they have changed what they're doing. So there's more reason to invest in the early good returns now than we've seen in the past. Plus, one of the things Jeff Passan said to me last year was, when the Royals, or not last year, I guess when they hired Matt Quatrero, was, the Rays believe in coaching. They have his joke was they have coaches who coach the coaches, and
which is fantastic.
Yeah,
we just playing the Giants. We just played the Giants. They're kind of the same. We talked about that over the winter. The Giants have such great coaching, but if the Royals are embracing that concept, that coaching can make a huge difference.
That coaching matters.
I'm on board. Yeah.
And Cotman said it, so coaching matters. Yes. Coaching
but
matters.
Apparently a lot more than even we thought. And we thought it mattered a heck of a lot.
But I want to double back to Olivares because, Tony says, a serious question. Is Olivares a major a-hole to deal with? Why can't he catch a break? And I do think that there is a bit of nobody there is really buying it because they're not willing to try on it. But it's also, I'll equate it back to, and I think this is it, too, with Lopez. Again, how many bad defensive players can they put out there? Now, if Lopez proves to be much better behind the plate and can earn their trust, then it gets easier. But I don't think they don't like his defense. But this is one that if this year is about retooling the roster and not just, cutting guys, but getting something for him. Okay, if you don't believe Olivares can play defensively the way you want, then you still need to play him. Let the bat shine so that you can trade.
Exactly. I was about to say, if you've made the decision that you're going to keep Bobby Witt at shortstop and maybe hurt yourself defensively because you need to find out if Bobby Witt can play shortstop, that same philosophy has to guide you with Edward Olivares. Maybe he can't, but you have to find out if he can hit. You have to find out if he's a valuable player or not. And you're not going to find that out with him playing 40% of the time.
If it is a year that you have said we will sacrifice wins to find out about individuals, then find out about all the individuals.
Exactly. If you want to find out about if MJ Melendez can catch, I think you can go ahead and find out if Edward Olivares can play left field.
Yes. I would agree wholeheartedly. I would agree.
Especially on a day where MJ Melendez was catching.
Yes.
So,
By the way, we're brought to you by our friends at GAN Asphalt and Concrete, one of Kansas City's fastest growing companies, one of the best places in KC to work as well. And they are hiring for all positions: project manager, dump truck drivers, operators, and crew members. Starting pay up to $30 per hour based on experience with paid time off and insurance, just to name a few of the benefits. You can check out more at ganasphalt.com. Find out more info. You too can join Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, GAN Asphalt and Concrete, making parking lot problems disappear in Kansas City since 1994, and hiring right now. Go to ganasphalt.com to find out more information. The bats overall, when is it not early for the bats? The level of concern for the lack of offense right now is where, Rany?
I mean, my concern level is definitely at least yellow, maybe yellowish orange. The hard hit ball data is better than the results. The results are terrible. The results are, if they're about last in the league, they came into today next to last in runs scored in the American League. They scored 1 run. But you know what? They were 6th in the American League in home runs coming into today. Like, there is some data. What's really killing them is batting average on balls in play. And their hit, their barrel rate has been pretty good. Their strikeout to walk data has been okay. It's not great. It's below average, but it's not terrible. I think that they're better than they have shown. But yes, I'm a little concerned. I said before the season, what did I say? If we had the average pitching staff, they'll make the playoffs. The pitching staff, incredibly, is they're average. Like, forget about runs scored. They came into today 9th in the league in walks. This is the pitching staff. Walks allowed, 7th in strikeouts. And today they had 1 walk and 11 strikeouts. Like, they are basically a middle of the pack pitching staff. I will stick with that prediction. If that pitching staff continues to pitch this well, the offense will come around and they'll be average, and they'll be in playoff contention until the end of the year. But they need to start hitting. And if there are, I guess I feel a little better that there are some easy things they can do. Stop playing Hunter Dozier quite so much. Like, it's not like Hunter Dozier is carrying the offense. Hunter Dozier is 3 for 25, all singles. He was benched today. That's a good sign. They are, they're letting Matt Duffy play. They've got some options. We'll talk about one more option pretty soon here. But I think it's too early to panic. They got to just keep throwing them out there. Pasquantino, I think, is fine. And Pasquantino, he had a double and a single today. He's hitting the ball hard. I really have no concerns. Kyle Isbell, which we haven't really talked about, his defensive metrics are off the charts right now. It's only been a week, but his defensive are great. He barreled another ball today, like 106 miles an hour exit velocity, which was an out. But if he hits even a little bit, he's going to be great. I'm not worried about him. But we need to see Bobby Witt start hitting a little bit better. Michael Massey needs to start hitting. And then if Franmil Reyes doesn't start hitting, they might need to accept the possibility that there was a reason that he was given up on by 2 teams last year and move on from him as well.
Come on, he hit a home run yesterday.
He's got 2 home runs this year. He has no other hits. So
the man was brought here to hit the ball.
All or nothing. Yeah, he was brought in to hit home runs. I think they forgot to tell him, you can do other things. It's okay.
Yeah. It's okay to hit the ball hard, even if it doesn't go over the wall. Yeah, I do agree. I think we saw enough of a track record with guys turning the corner to believe in where it is. The lineup, and we had this a little bit earlier on in the chat room about, like, how about one day you play all the best players, right? Like, we have not seen, there's always, and this is maybe something that Royals fans are going to have to get used to, and over time the talent level is just going to have to grow to make it work. But Matt Quatraro and the Rays believe in everybody plays.
Right. Everybody
has a role. Everybody plays. Now, they also have a more complete roster, and he might need to start accepting.
That's what I was about to say. Like, I'm completely on board with the philosophy of use your players. Like, you have roster spots, you get value out of all of them, but it helps to have 13 guys on your roster, 13 hitters who actually have value. If you've got Hunter Dozier and Jackie Bradley Jr. on your roster, maybe the problem is that you shouldn't be using those guys so much. So
yeah,
and that will hopefully be solved with time.
And if Reyes is going to make Rob Deere look like a high frequency of contact hitter, that's a reference for the older folks. If you got gray hair, you'll remember who Rob Deere was. Look him up, young guys. If you needed power in your fantasy baseball, go get it. But he was going to crush everything else. That he could crush a baseball, but he would crush your average as well. That's there. How about the back end of the bullpen? A lot of chatter in the chat room as well about 76 pitches. I'm okay with that, just because I think it's okay to let Kris Bubic have some success, build
Right.
some numbers. That's
Absolutely.
fine.
I have no issue with that. I do not understand what Brian Yarbrough was doing in a one-run game. And this gets back to the roster construction, which is they have, three lefties in that bullpen, but you go into the eighth inning and you've Yarbrough is a great long man. He's the guy they brought in to be sort of a spot starter, six starter guy, pitch maybe 2 or 3 innings. And yes, they had some lefties coming up in the lineup, but having the platoon advantage is nice, but it's nice. It's a luxury. It's not as important as having a better pitcher on the mound.
Right.
And for Yarbrough to be out there and in a game situation and being allowed, even after they tied the score with a double, to let him pitch to Maikel Conforto because Maikel Conforto's a lefty with 2 outs in the eighth inning. It's a tie game. Like, you have Scott Barlow. Scott Barlow is one of the few things about Mike Matheny did with the bullpen that I liked was that he would use Scott Barlow to throw 6 outs, like get 2 inning saves. In this situation, they wouldn't even trust him to get 4 outs. They left Ryan Yarbrough in there to give up a game-winning home run. Now Barlow is like suffering from lack of use. He hasn't pitched in a couple of days. Fine. Jose Cuas is more of a specialist. Maybe you don't bring him in against the lefties. Dylan Coleman, if Dylan Coleman's on this roster, he needs to be in that spot. And if you don't trust him there because his velocity is down this season, maybe the problem is having Dylan Coleman on the roster and he should be in AAA.
Well, and here's one of the things that I liked. If you go to the bullpen usage, last 3 days, Scott Barlow had thrown the most pitches of anybody the last 3 days. Didn't pitch the day before, but he pitched the 2 days previous to that. 33 pitches, 28 from Jose Cuas. That was on Thursday. Hadn't pitched the last 2 nights. 27 from Chapman. He'd gone each of the last 2 games and thrown 27 pitches. 22 from Clark. We know the big, get out of the damage deal with him. High stress pitches. He wasn't.
And kind of a shout out to Taylor Clark, who has kind of very quietly, since he joined the Royals last year, has actually been a pretty good pitcher. Like that game put an exclamation point on it, striking out the side with the bases loaded. But 56 strikeouts and 9 walks. Yeah, he did, but it was like, there were like 2 ground ball and 1 line drive singles. Like, again, balls on play, he got a little unlucky, but then you want pitchers who strike guys out, don't walk anybody, and that's what he's been doing.
I agree. The good outweighs the bad, but there is the element of like, oh, John Elway with all the comebacks. Well, he also dug the hole, that need the comeback.
If Taylor Clark is the John Elway of relievers, that's, I guess, not the worst thing in the world. And I say that as a John Elway committed hater.
Sure. Amir Garrett had thrown 2 of the last 3 days. He had thrown 19 pitches. Here's the part for me. Carlos Hernandez had not thrown for 4 games. And, I know they obviously wanted the lefty with the lefty bats that were coming. That was the idea, but I'm not even really going to second guess. And to your point, Dylan Coleman had only pitched 1 of the previous 5 days and thrown 12 pitches. He was the guy that was the most available.
Well, this is my concern, is I feel like they justifiably are worried about using Dylan Coleman in that situation.
Yes.
But to me, it's like, if you're not able to use him, because Carlos Hernandez today, he came out of the game because he may or may not have strained his hamstring. Like, they were having him work on the mound, and it was a weird situation where they looked like they took him out of the game, but the Giants hadn't yet called a pinch hitter. So that they put him back on the mound, waited for the Giants to call a pinch hitter, then brought in Yarbrough. I understand they just wanted to protect his legs. And
that's where I was going with this is, at some point, some guys just if they're on the roster, they're going to have to pitch. And to your point about Dylan Coleman, that like, if we're worried about Dylan Coleman or they're trying to fix something while he's in the big leagues, come up with a mystery injury and give him, a rehab assignment and give him a chance to try to get back. Like, that's the thing is, I really, for me, like, oh, Paul Hoover lost his mind, or what are they doing? Or what were they thinking? When you go through and look at who had been used when, there really weren't that many options. And if you're on the roster, you're going to have to pitch. I don't like Yarbrough there. And that's what sent me to looking at this, was because I'm like, why the hell is Yarbrough in late? And when I see that, okay, Barlow pitched 2 of the last 3 days, not yesterday, I know that's probably it. And what we don't know, and we never know, is, like you said, Carlos Hernandez, as he heard, did Scott Barlow say, I just don't have it? Did they have him throw a couple? And it's like, it's not there yet. I need another day. You've got to manage for the long haul. So this wasn't Game 7 of the World Series where all hands are on deck.
No, I think to me, it really comes down to Dylan Coleman. And again, if you don't trust him there, you know what? Josh Stomont's in AAA. He pitched a shutout. He's got 3 innings in Omaha this year, 1 walk, 6 strikeouts. Like, That's, him and Dylan Coleman in terms of results are very similar pitchers, right?
Yes.
Kind of, they don't throw enough strikes, but definite power stuff. Stillmont, was really down last year. They're having him work on some stuff. Maybe we see him called up. I am surprised not a single pitcher has been called up or sent down this year. Like that, one of the things the Rays do very well is turn that 13-man pitching staff into a 15 or 16-man pitching staff with all the shuttling back and forth. We've seen none of that yet. Might have burned the Royals a little bit today.
Yeah, and
you know who also would have looked really good out there in the 8th inning? Richard Lovelady. I think he could have looked good out there today. He's faced 13 batters, I think, in AAA and allowed 1 to reach base. So just put that out there.
If I could scroll back fast enough and find it, there were a couple of Lovelady comments that were thrown your way. I think one of them, like the Lovelady minute. Are we going to go through detailing?
We had the Jacob Junis minute last year. Believe me, if he gets to the major leagues, there will be a Richard Lovelady minute. I'm almost certain.
But let's get to the minor league minute. It makes its return.
Yep.
Somebody you want to highlight, somebody Randy's got his eye on down in the minor leagues that we want to feature here in the Kaufman Corner podcast. Who is the subject of the minor league minute today?
So the minor league season for most teams outside of AAA just got started like on Wednesday or Thursday. So most teams only played a couple games, but Omaha, they started a week ago. We got some data. We got a lot of games, and I thought it was very appropriate that the first minor league minute of this season is the same guy we chose as the first minor league minute last season, and that's Maikel Garcia. And Garcia is.
By the way, a lot of people had that on their bingo card.
Maikel Garcia. I mean, they can look at a stat sheet as well as I can, and when you've got a 489 on base percentage as a shortstop, that's going to get some attention, right? 9 games, he's got 10 walks, 9 strikeouts. He's struck out a little bit more. He's also got 3 doubles and a homer. Like you're seeing the maturation of him as a physical person. He's 22 years old now, 23 years old. He's kind of developing into his power, and I think that's also is a little bit more swing and miss, but you'll take a little more swing and miss to get a little more pop, and the plate discipline has always been excellent with him. So he's batting .353, 489 on base, 529 slugging. And I will say what I've been saying for a long time. I think the Royals right now are a better team, have a better lineup with Maikel Garcia in it than Hunter Dozier. And while I think they would improve defensively at 2 positions by having Garcia at short and Witt at third, at this point, if you want to put Garcia at third base and figure out whether you need to flip-flop them later on, I would be fine with that. I think Maikel Garcia is major league ready to be at least an average hitter and would be a significant upgrade at third base defensively. I think it'll be very interesting to see going forward how much the Royals put Hunter Dozier on the bench. We're seeing it. Like I said, Matt Duffy's been playing there. Nicky Lopez has played some third base. But the Royals are not unaware that Hunter Dozier is a problem. I at least give them credit. They're not in complete denial. He's not playing every day. But if he continues to not hit, they're going to have to make a difficult decision at some point. And I hope Maikel Garcia is part of that.
And I think obviously you don't want him up yet because you want to buy the extra year.
And it's interesting you say that. He has 15 days of service time, which means if he stays in the minor leagues for about 3 weeks, maybe 2 more weeks from now, I think is enough to buy that year of service time. And I think that's fine. I'm not advocating for him to be brought up right now. But by the end of April, if Hunter continues to hit like this and Maikel Garcia continues to hit like this, it might be time to make a move.
Yeah, and that is one of the things to keep an eye on. 170 days equals a full season. Full season is usually 181, 182, 183, something like that. But at 170, they go ahead and count you towards it. So you want to keep them under 170 days this year. So you can just back up whatever the season is this year. And he's got 15 more. So you're going to back up even beyond that.
About 25, 26 days. So like the end of April, I think he'll be fine. And believe me, teams know exactly how much service time they need. Kris Bryant was brought up literally the day that he could not earn free agency in his rookie season. And that was for a team that was trying to go to the playoffs and did. There's don't hate the player, hate the game. And that's the game that these teams play.
Maikel Garcia today 1 for 4 with a walk. So on base, a 400 on base clip today. Even though Omaha lost, he did his job batting second. Tells you how much they think of him, hitting him in the premium spot of batting second. All right, don't forget the Kaufman Corner podcast brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, proudly serving all of Kansas City. Kansas City's nationally recognized paving and pavement maintenance contractor. They do it all. Parking lot problems, are no problem anymore. If you know the folks at Gann Asphalt and Concrete, I've been serving Kansas City since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews. Every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com. Join their team. Right now, they're hiring for all positions up to $30 per hour based on experience with paid time off and insurance, just to name a few of the benefits. You can be a part of one of Kansas City's best companies. Check them out online at GannAsphalt.com. That's GannAsphalt.com. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things parking lots. So even though the Royals are 3-7, it's a happy Rany Jazayerli double back. We'll smile. We get a little bit of talent in the minor leagues to talk about with the minor league minute, and of course, we like what we're seeing out of the pitching up at the top with the rotation. Hopefully, that continues. So, for the good doctor, Dr. Rany Jazayerli, my name is Soren Petro, saying thank you very much for joining us here on Kaufman Corner.